Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 59 for July 28th, 2017. Hey everyone, Dan Rubino here, joined again by Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast, and hopefully this week the video will hold up in case you really enjoy seeing us live. This week we'll be talking about all sorts of things. Although it was a slow week as usual for the summertime, there were some big news. We're talking about the new build for Windows 10 that came out, which is actually very nice and has some new features and some big changes for the Windows Insider program that we're going to dissect. We'll also talk about the Elite X3 from HP, evidently going to Verizon, or at least getting CDMA certification for Verizon. We'll talk about Microsoft Paint. Yes, we're going to party like it's 1995 and talk about one of my favorite apps that none of you actually probably use, but all through a hissy fit once Microsoft said they may be getting rid of it. We'll talk about different app versions. We're going through this weird process again of where we're seeing new apps for certain rings and not others, and how confusing that is, which is mostly just a rant for us, but that's fine. I'm going to talk about my GPD Pocket. It's a 7-inch Pocket PC and whether or not it's any good. We'll talk about Intel quad-core processors, which are evidently coming for Ultrabooks later this year, which is a huge thing. We're going to break that down as well. And finally, we're going to talk about Cortana Skills because, frankly, Zach and I have actually never talked about Cortana Skills, and this week Fitbit joined the ranks of what is a growing army of skills. We'll talk about whether or not this is actually useful or not in the larger context of where things are going. How are you doing, Zach, this week?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
It's fine. Friday here. Getting ready for, well, it's Hamburger Friday, so I got to hit up Five Guys. No, we're not sponsored by Five Guys, but I feel like they should sponsor us because I do mention them every week because this is the time of the week, and I'm excited because UFC 214 is tomorrow night, and I'm a big UFC fan. It's going to be a great, great fight. I'm actually really stoked. I still got to write my review for Sling TV and my experience with that. And I'm excited because for the first time, as far as I know, they're offering a UFC pay-per-view through Sling TV. So this is always the issue, right, when you switch from cable to a streaming TV service, which is, can you get all the stuff you want but still have it streaming? And pay-per-view was one of those things. I don't think Sling did that, but now you can get UFC through that. And I'm excited because the Xbox app for UFC, which there actually is one, is pretty awful. And it's just, I really want them to fix it. I want them to make a Windows 10 UWP that fans everywhere. And gets better streaming, because right now it has this really annoying feature where it's a bug, where you start a stream and then if you paused it and then you start again, it'll start for about 3 seconds and then it freezes. And the only way to fix this bug is you have to physically hard reset or hard reboot the Xbox.
Wow.
Which if you ever and I don't mean reset it like a start from scratch, but you know what I'm saying, where if you pull the plug from it, if you've ever done that with an Xbox, that boot up time is no fun at all. That's and if you're trying to watch a fight, it's really annoying. So that's my side rant. Anyway, let's talk about Windows 10, the Insider program, new build, new changes. Zach, what's going on with this week's build?
So Microsoft announced a new build this week. We'll get to that in a minute, though. What they also announced alongside the build was some changes to the Insider program that a lot of people should be aware of. So starting with the build that came out this week, Microsoft are now offering the build in 2 flavors, both being from the RS3 release branch and the RS pre-release branch. So essentially what Microsoft is doing here is flighting 2 builds that right now are the same. They will differ at some point in the near future, but right now they're the same, except one is for the Redstone 3 release branch and the other one is the pre-release branch where Microsoft will continue in developing Windows into Redstone 4, Redstone 5 and so on. So Microsoft is calling this Windows Insider Skip Ahead, and essentially what you do is you go into the Settings app, go to the Insider settings area within the Settings app, and there's a new option that you have which allows you to either skip ahead to Redstone 4 development builds or remain on the Redstone 3 development branch. And basically what that means right now is nothing. As I said, the builds are pretty much identical, but over the next few weeks they will begin to differ. Microsoft says that at some point in the near future the Redstone 4 builds will jump quite further ahead and they will start getting new features for the next release, which will include things like timeline and whatever else is planned for Redstone 4. The Redstone 3 branch from here on out, mostly going to be fixes and smaller enhancements, no more big features. We're pretty much done with that at this point. So if you're somebody who's in the Insider program just for the new features, you're likely going to want to go the Redstone 4 route. If you're ready to sort of, test the final bits of Redstone 3, the full creators update, then you want to remain on the RS3 development branch. And by default, most insiders will be on the RS3 branch. You have to manually go in and change to Redstone 4. It is worth noting that the Redstone 4 builds will get progressively more buggy as development continues, and then of course they will get better towards the end of Redstone 4 development. Redstone 3 development from here on out should remain pretty stable. I know Dan was mentioning the build that they released this week was pretty stable, which makes sense because we're now at that tail end of development, as I believe I mentioned last week, where Microsoft is now putting the finishing touches and polishing up everything before rolling out to the public in, I believe, late September or early October. So
I was going to say, yep. For this week, one of the biggest bugs they fixed, well, there's two bugs. One bothered me, one really bothered you, although that one bothered me too. The one that bothered me was where resizing the screen, if you use a different screen setting besides 100%, evidently the target, so when you would put the mouse over the object to click it, those things are supposed to line up, right, where you want to click it and it actually clicks. And evidently that was misaligned. So you would click things like in the action center and nothing would happen. And it was really frustrating. I would get Skype calls and like, and it would pop in and I couldn't answer the call. And I was just like, oh my God. So that's fixed now. That was one of the biggest and most irritating bugs for me. And the other one that really bothered you, you did a really funny Twitter video about, was the copy and paste function in Edge. So you would right click and try to copy a link, paste it into another document or another tab, and all of a sudden it did not paste. And that was really kind of, I mean, you made the joke about how you could accidentally share a password or something sensitive.
Right. Yeah.
Or that wrong site that you swear you didn't go to. You don't know how that got there.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was definitely... Now, do you think... Someone pointed out that maybe that was related to some of the cloud copy-paste thing that they're doing for the newest releases?
I have no idea. What I do know is that bug has been present in Windows 10 since Windows 10 launched 2 years ago. It's been in and out of various UWP apps. I know people on Twitter who say it happens even in Win32 apps sometimes. It's very random. And I notice it happens in Edge a lot more. I don't know what that's about. So I think it was just a Windows 10 thing, and maybe it might be tied to the cloud stuff. I have no idea, but it was a really annoying bug. And yeah, like as you said, it was a dangerous bug, like, because obviously we're copying and pasting lots of sometimes secret things, pasting them, and then if I'm trying to paste something into Twitter that I may have copied from somewhere else, but it didn't select that copy and it's still got my previous copy in there, and I don't check. I've done this many times in Slack as well. I'll paste the wrong link. Damn it, that's not the right link, because Edge would have just incorrectly copied the link. So it's so good to see that fixed 2 years later. But yeah, better late than never.
I've seen it in the Twitter app where you'd copy paste and nothing would happen. And you almost had to do like control V. You had to like, it was almost like something with the keys where if the key presses were too close together for the key shortcut, it wouldn't register and you had to almost like slam the keys. It was really annoying, but that seems to be fixed now too. So yes, overall for that question we get every week, if you are currently on release preview or production and you're thinking about jumping in, I don't want to say absolutely this is the build to jump in onto, but it feels darn close. I've been using it on one of my Surface laptops, and I can't really say I've noticed any severe bugs or anything that's really bothering me that would interrupt daily flow. Now, of course, the issue here is always your PC is different than mine, and there are those kind of situations where this could happen, but it really does feel like, okay, now they're starting to tighten it up and everything's coming together, so that's always a good thing. Let's actually bridge this. Well, unless do you have more to share with that?
I just wanted to quickly talk about a couple of the features that was announced in this week's build, then we'll move on to the next thing. So real quick, some of the new features in this build: you can now link your phone, your Android or iPhone, to your Windows 10 PC. There's a new option in settings. No Windows Phone support, unfortunately, although Windows Phone users are kind of already connected through through Cortana, but this is a slightly different system. This essentially allows you to basically directly send things from your phone to your PC. So it's more like a direct share than what Cortana does, which is pick up where I left off.
Have you tried this?
Haven't tried this, no.
So I have, and it actually works very well. And I don't understand, like many in our audience, why it's not in Windows 10 mobile. So what it is, it's a share target. So if if you use Windows 10 Mobile, it's a pretty familiar thing where you go to share something with that little, the new icon that we got last quarter. And it gives you that little window, and it shows you apps you can share to. If you're like me, it's a very useful feature, and it's actually improved a lot. I think Microsoft's done a great job with the Share UI and the target feature set here. Like, for instance, now you can share to Skype, the new Skype UWP app, which is pretty cool. But, I mean, this isn't also a unique feature set, right? Android has this as well. And so what it is, if you're on using the Chrome browser or anything, you can now, when you go to share it, one of the objects there will be your PC, and you can click that, and then it gives you the option of sharing either now or you can do it later. And it works pretty well, I have to admit. It's kind of a neat feature to have. I do suffer from the problem of it asks you which computer you want to share it to, and I have like 9,000 PCs. And a lot of them I never named because they go back 4 or 5 years, and this wasn't a problem. But this is a separate issue where if you log, so do you know how this works, by the way? Sidetrack, but if you're setting up a PC for the first time and you log in with a Microsoft account, it gives you a default name of like desktop dash weird numbers and letters as the name of the PC. You then have to remember after to go in and rename the PC under the About screen. If, however, you log in without a Microsoft account, it gives you the window to actually name the PC during the out-of-box experience. Why there's a difference. This is Microsoft for you, but it's frustrating for me because, like a good Microsoft user, I always log in with my Microsoft account, so I always have to post, update, go in, remember to name my PC. And so I've actually hit the limit. If you hit over 50 PCs, like, it starts to run into problems with OneDrive where you can't like sync stuff anymore. So there's actually a limit you can do with these. But this is the issue I have with the share target, but that's a Dan problem. So, but it works pretty neat. I would love to see this with Windows 10 Mobile. Sure, you could do the Cortana, pick up where you left off kind of thing. But I think this is definitely a little bit more, it's a share target. It's targeted, it's more specific.
The problem with pick up where I left off is that it's not, you don't control it. It's very random, right. And you don't get to choose what gets synced across devices. So Cortana can just say, oh, I found these 3 tabs, and maybe it didn't pick up 5 of your tabs that you had already open. So it is very random, which is why I understand some people's frustration with this not coming to Windows Phone. And what sort of made things worse this week was sort of Joe Belfiore did a really weird tweet, and I saw lots of Microsoft employees retweeting this as if like, oh yeah, this is our start. Joe Belfiore, basically what he said was, we have no hate for Windows Phone, we're just bringing all of Windows Phone's features to our rival platforms. That's essentially what he said. It made no sense, and all the Microsoft employees were like, yeah, let's retweet that. Joe said it's just you can't say that.
This is that, I mean, and we'll talk about this later with the paint stuff. This is the classic thing where Microsoft, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't kind of situation. So, yeah, definitely a little bit confusing. I think it's a neat feature. I like to see it a little bit more. Someone mentions that, well, it opens up the mobile version on the sites on the computer. But that really shouldn't happen, though, if you're using a good browser. Or rather, the site should be able to detect if you're on a desktop browser versus a mobile browser and automatically switch. I don't think I've seen it too often, but that gets to that weird programming stuff for web things. But that should be solvable.
So real quick, there are a couple of features worthy of, or not worthy of talking about. They're just smaller changes. What is worthy talking about, however, is a new sort of feature thing with the mobile build. Finally, Feature 2 branch got some sort of new feature, and it's less of a feature, more of a function that should have been there from the get-go, if I'm honest. But Continuum now works in portrait mode. So if you have a monitor that sits in portrait mode, like many of you do, if you connect your Lumia or Windows Phone up to that via Continuum, it will now display how you would expect it to in portrait mode. Yay! And that's the only noteworthy change in the build for mobile.
Which is kind of a weird thing. I mean, it's a neat thing to have, but one, it goes to show you that somewhere in the bowels of Microsoft, there's some guy or girl working on Continuum for Windows 10 Mobile still, and like adding little things to it. And the reason why it's kind of weird is because we've seen C Shell running on Windows 10 Mobile, and C Shell does this natively, it seems. So it's kind of strange that they're still working on shell functions for a mobile, but it goes to show you that the Elite X3 is still evidently getting support. We did see a firmware update recently, and I guess we can segue. But before we segue into the Elite X3, I also want to mention that The game mode, I forget what they called it now. I have it actually, this discussion with Mauro and I were talking about it. Under the game mode settings, game mode, I got to make sure I articulate the M. Not game mode. There was game monitor. Now, Microsoft never really defined what this is, and they still haven't talked about it, but now it's been renamed to True Play, sorry.
Oh
and
God.
It's like all Microsoft things. It's not True Space Play, it's True Play, one word, capital P, because it's like, it might as well be a little copyright.
Is it true without the E though? TRU?
No, they're not that hip. Yeah, this isn't a Valley type thing. But it is an anti-cheat system that's coming to at least the Xbox Live stuff that you'd be running on your PC. We don't know much about this, but it is some sort of anti-cheat measure, which if you don't know, this again shows my age, but I know when people play Steam, evidently it's a hobby that people run cheat mods on their PC so that they get to like see through walls and, you know, all that kind of jazz. And there's a lot of effort on the server side of these companies to detect those, sort of like if, you know, you're doing back in the day with smartphones and trying to get a hotspot going. And so this is just sort of built into the OS. We don't know much about what it works with, how it works, what it does. Microsoft has yet to define it, but now it's called True Play. Kind of interesting stuff. I don't know. I actually watched a video recently of gamers who are streaming, and they have like a large audience, like on Mixer or Twitch. They have like thousands of followers, and they get caught running a cheat thing. And like, it's not like their audience knew they were cheating. They were just like, I'm the greatest gamer ever. And then they get booted from the server because it shows them they were cheating. And I just thought it was pretty funny that that happened. But yes, so that's what that is.
Real quick, going back to the mobile thing, you mentioned that it's odd for them to be adding more shell stuff to the current shell. I believe that might be because current Windows phones aren't getting the new C shell stuff,
Sure.
which would make sense. Also, the Windows Phone, this is someone in the comments briefly mentioned that Kevin Gallo announced this week that Windows 10 Mobile will continue to receive new APIs for the foreseeable future. So although Windows 10 Mobile isn't getting the main development branch stuff anymore, as we know, it was branched off into Feature 2, which is technically Redstone 2 with fixes and a couple of new features, as you saw today. That API is introduced to the UWP platform in Redstone 3, and I assume Redstone 4, and maybe even Redstone 5 through 2018. Those will apparently be backported to Windows 10 Mobile Redstone 2, or Feature 2, sorry. So that means that apps that developers target Redstone 3 or Redstone 4 with, that should still work on on Windows 10 Mobile until obviously Microsoft stops backporting the new APIs. So I would say if you have a Windows Phone today, that should still work for at least the next year before you start seeing apps just not being supported anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty big news, actually. It means, I mean, it was tacitly assumed that Microsoft would always support Windows 10 mobiles. Not always, but at least going into the future. But this means that, as Zach pointed out, that when devs make these new UWP apps and add new features to them, those features will also show up on mobile, and there won't be any issue there. And it's kind of a big deal that, again, you assume that this would happen, but it's good to hear sort of officially that they're going to continue. So if you do have a Lumia 950 or Elite X3, you're going to continue to see this stuff. And then obviously it's super important for that to continue.
Yeah, and I would assume 2018 would be where that stops happening, like Redstone 5, because that would have been 2 years since the last Windows Phone, which would have been the Elite X3 or the Alcatel.
Yeah.
And 2 years is usually the general cycle for most phones outside of iPhones, where they get support for 2 years and then that's it pretty much, which would make sense for Redstone 5 to be sort of the last time where APIs get backported to Windows 10 Mobile. But hopefully by then we'll have a replacement from Microsoft, but who knows.
Surface Pocket?
Maybe.
We're still not hearing that is not happening. Let's just there's actually more we could say, but we won't right now, but there's still smoke there, I should say. So that's good news for people that I don't know. I feel like probably within the last few months we definitely hit rock bottom. It's not going to get any worse. And I feel like now we're starting to it's starting to, there's some little, I almost see a speck of light at the end of the tunnel. Either that or I'm getting really dizzy and I'm about to pass out. But there's definitely some hope there for our audience, and hopefully we'll be sharing more over the next few months over that. But not all is lost. Speaking of the Elite X3, let's get into that quickly. There was a FCC, I believe, notice about the Elite X3 getting CDMA approval for Verizon. In the latest firmware, I love this, the latest firmware for the HP Elite X3 says, basically when you put in a CDMA SIM, which always sounds kind of weird, but Verizon has these, and I believe Sprint does too, if you put it into the second slot, the Elite X3, it won't crash the phone. Which is funny. They're not saying it works, because it doesn't, but it actually does for a second work. When I put in my Verizon SIM, I actually do get a Verizon signal and briefly connect up to their LTE network. But the reason why it won't is because Verizon has to certify devices for it, and that SIM needs to work with it. And it gets into this weird, CDMA and their LTE, how this works is really confusing if you're not in the US. Verizon and Sprint are CDMA networks, but they also have data that is LTE. And so your phone, the part that makes the phone calls and SMS, could be CDMA. So there's still that radio in there, but then there's another radio for LTE data. So you can be on Verizon now and get SIM cards, which is weird because years ago, CDMA was strictly a code that was on the back of the phone, and it had to be registered on the network. That's why you can never take phones to Sprint, because basically Sprint would buy, say, 5,000 Palm phones, let's go way back, and all those phones, all 5,000, all those numbers were scanned into their system. And as soon as someone bought one and activated the phone, it would ping the network and go, oh, yep, you're in the system, and then you're matched up. If that hex number was not in the Sprint network database, no way you can get that phone on there. That's changed a bit now with the LTE stuff. So you can take like an iPhone and throw in a SIM card into it, and it will go on the network. So evidently the Elite X3 is, we should be clear here, do not expect Verizon to start a national campaign of advertising the Elite X3, nor should you expect them to start selling in their stores or even online. AT&T has certified the Elite X3 for their network. All that means is they guarantee basically compatibility with all their services. AT&T, however, does not sell the phone. They don't distribute it. They don't do anything with it. And that's probably what's going to happen here. Now, this gets to the bigger question. Why the heck is there no CDMA support for Windows 10 Mobile? Now, I know a lot of people are going to be, wait, Dan, I have a Lumia 735, and it works on Verizon because Verizon sold it to me, and it runs Windows 10 Mobile. And the issue here goes back to some other issues we've had with upgrades in the past, which is, it's true, if you have a Windows Phone 8.1 device that was on CDMA, it could upgrade to Windows 10 Mobile and keep the drivers and everything, and you are fine. However, there are no Windows 10 Mobile only devices that were sold on Verizon or Sprint that were out of the box Windows 10 Mobile. And this gets into the weird thing about, like, what was it, with the voicemail, and years ago, it was the visual voicemail, I believe, was an issue where Microsoft didn't own the driver for it, and they ran into issues with Windows 10 Mobile and how the system booted up with those drivers, and they couldn't control the driver. They didn't own it, and they had to like go back, and I don't know. It's confusing. And what I've heard from Peter Bright from Ars Technica, I've never confirmed this, but he heard, and it's probably not surprising, that when they started laying off their mobile team, they laid off all their CDMA engineers, or too many of them. I'm not really sure. And because of that, they just didn't have the staff to basically make these new drivers and build it into Windows 10 Mobile. Combined with the fact that at the time they were basically saying we're going to retrench Windows 10 Mobile, CDMA was not on their hit list, right? They were not going to be like, if we just got this on Verizon, Windows 10 Mobile will be saved. I think they knew at that point that this thing is so done that so they didn't sink any resources into it. Having said that, we all know Windows 10 on ARM is coming. Microsoft has announced it. They've showed off some test devices and everything with the Snapdragon 835. I would assume that with those Windows 10 on ARM and whatever Surface mobile pocket phone is, they're going to want CDMA for that. Like if they're really serious about being in the cellular market, some form, whether you want to call it a phone or a pocket PC thing, they're going to probably need to get CDMA at some point. So this is a problem that they need to obviously address. And it looks like, at least right now, that the Elite X3 is going to be that first device to sort of really get the support. Now, we don't know, is it going to be a new hardware? It looks like my Elite X3 can, like I said, I put a SIM in there, and for a good 2 minutes, it actually stays on the Verizon network. So hopefully we'll actually see that. This will be the groundwork. Now, like I said, with Windows 10 on ARM, that's the cellular stuff. Everything they're learning from mobile, everything they've learned from mobile, they're going to port back into Windows 10 on ARM. Like this stuff that you're doing with the cellular, the SMS, the telephony, voicemail, all those drivers, all those things, they're not going to scrap that from Windows 10 mobile. Like, oh, we're just going to rewrite everything now. They're going to take all that knowledge, all those drivers, all those things, and put it into Windows 10. So that's one of the reasons why you still see support for Windows 10 mobile. It's kind of important for them to have their feet in the door to keep up with these drivers and the networks and all that kind of stuff. So that's my rant on the Elite X3.
So wait, you say it connects to Verizon then disconnects after 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, that's weird. Why would that?
Well, that's because it goes back to the fact that the Elite X3 is not certified for the Verizon network. It probably doesn't recognize the device.
So the network sees it and goes, that's not a device we certify. Right. Get off my network.
So, for instance, on AT&T, if I put an AT&T SIM into my Elite X3, when I go to my AT&T page, it actually recognizes under my account, that's the HP Elite X3. It actually will show that. So it's in their system. They recognize that device. There's also stuff in the firmware that could not be, and probably is not turned on my Elite X3 right now. In other words, when they flash it, they can put in the codes and the network radio stuff to properly connect to Verizon's network, like the keys. And it probably doesn't have that right now. It probably has some of that stuff. So it's kind of halfway there. So presumably they could do a firmware update, and then I could drop in the SIM. And assuming the radios are all there, and we think they are, it should work. So, but that's an interesting story to follow. It's really good though, because HP needs CDMA. And when I talked to them about this, it's not like they were like, yeah, we thought about doing Verizon with the Elite X3, but we're like, screw that. Why would we want? No, that was not the case at all. They wanted to. They just couldn't because of Microsoft. And they didn't just throw Microsoft on the bus. This is all very coy. They don't like to piss off their partners. So they won't come out and say, oh, this is all Microsoft's fault. But that was the wink nod that this was out of their control. And they have to basically wait until they put a request in with Microsoft. Hey, can we get the CDMA support for this device? And Microsoft, it's on our to-do list. We have these other things we need to take care of first. It looks like now they're finally getting around to the CDMA stuff. So, there you go.
That's good news,
mobile stuff. Yeah. So there's hope. But it's good. But Elite X3, people have always pointed out from day one, if a business device like this needs to succeed in the U.S., or at least have a chance, it needs to be on Verizon, because Verizon's a huge network for businesses, and I wholeheartedly agree. But like I said, in this case is not HP's fault. They weren't like, no, we won't do that. They want to get their phone on as many networks as possible. That's just obvious,
Yeah. I mean, I think the Elite X3 as well. I think you can get it on sale right now. I think it's cheaper than it was when it first launched. I know it was pretty expensive when it first launched, but you can now get the Elite X3 and the dock for, I think, $200 off, or at least £200 off in the UK.
It's still a fun phone. I got mine right here. It's on Fast Ring, the latest firmware. I don't know. It's still one of my favorite devices. The only thing is I wish the camera was better.
I just wish it was a bit smaller. 6 inches is just. I just wish it was a tiny bit smaller. But
sure, yeah, 5.5 inch for 5.7 would have been pretty. If you do that and put a faster camera in there and a better camera, it's still a Windows 10 mobile device. And maybe glance screen. Glance screen would be still kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, as well, what happened to that special Elite X3 that was like teased in February, but then never heard of again?
Who knows?
It got cancelled.
They won't tell me. They won't tell me.
It got cancelled. That's what happened.
Well, yeah, but I'm sure they're still sinking money to development stuff. HP, if you've been following my reviews, I think they're one of the most exciting companies. I like Dell a lot, but HP seems to be doing like a lot of really kind of cool stuff with their hardware. I'm just really impressed with it. I still would like to see them. I still hope to see them do a SureView for the HP Elite X3 G2. That would be pretty awesome. Imagine in public, you just hit a button on the side and it makes your screen opaque so only you can see it. Oh my God, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know, fingers crossed that. But that's a lot of technology. I don't know how, you get that in there, but I'm sure maybe they're looking into it. So,
should we talk about paint?
let's talk about the other controversy this week. So many. This was an easily solvable problem. This goes back to where Microsoft still is, as good as Microsoft has gotten with interacting with its audience, they're still a little tone deaf sometimes. So Microsoft Paint was listed on your Windows 10 list of deprecated items. And you published this, and you honestly didn't even make a big deal of it. You're like, here are the things that Microsoft's not going to be supporting anymore. And deprecation is a weird word, because if you're not in this business, you don't really use it very often. All it means is it's not really supported anymore. They're not going to develop it anymore, but it doesn't mean it's going to stop working either. It just means it's not on their to-do list. Now, a strong argument can be made that MS Paint has been deprecated for years. Like, there's really nothing new in it. But the implication here was when you deprecate something, it puts it on the list that at some point it'll probably be removed. Now, Microsoft did not say they were going to remove Paint, but that's what people immediately jumped to. And afterwards, it seems like there might have been some truth to it. So people freaked out, and it caught on to a lot of social sites. I saw 9gag. Super Deluxe has, if you don't follow Super Deluxe on YouTube, they're a trip. They did a live, I think it was a 90-minute live stream on YouTube where a person you would send in a photo and he would draw it in Paint, and it was really awful. And it was just like, they're a strange channel. But obviously Paint goes back to, for a lot of us, for a long time. It's right up there with Solitaire and all these like little bits in Windows 10 that have just been there since, Paint goes back to 1985. And so it's a very old app. And it was one of the first apps we had. Now, it's never been a very good app, but someone like me actually uses, and no joke, I use Paint like 15 times a day. I use it professionally, but I also use it for Twitter when I just want to be a jerk and, juxtapose like Steve Jobs rolling in his grave or something. But, and so this was a problem that Microsoft could avoid. So they said they're going to deprecate it. They said, okay, you have Paint 3D now. And the thing is, I think a lot of us, including myself, don't feel like Paint 3D is really I get it's the next generation of Paint. But for someone like me, it's not. Like, I don't, and part of this is just me being older. I look at Paint 3D, I'm like, no, that's not Paint. And then they came out, there was some blowback from this. Like I said, once, tech media lives in its old world. So it complained, but once it got into actually social stuff, it was actually really funny. Like I said, 9gag and Super Deluxe, which normally doesn't cover this kind of thing. They felt the blowback, and immediately they said, okay, well, we're going to put it into the store as a separate app, and you could just download it. And that was funny for a couple of reasons. One, it raises the question, was that always the plan? Like, were they really just going to pull it out and just put it into the store? In which case, they should have just said that, and no one would have cared or batted an eye, right? If that was not the plan, why? Why was that not the plan? Like, were they just going to leave it? It doesn't look like now they're going to, when people say, well, deprecation doesn't mean they're going to pull it. I get that. But now it looks like, well, they were going to pull it. That they were just going to pull it out and go, hey, there's Paint 3D, use that instead. And so now you just have, I don't know, like why not just pull all these old apps? Like Windows Fax and Scan is still in Windows 10, right? Like, why not just pull these apps out and put them into the store into like the legacy app collection? So like, and you open the store and like, here are all your old apps from like 1985 onwards. Like and you can just go and download them and install them. Like, I get it's probably not a priority for them to do that, but like, this is just kind of baffling, So the good news is now Paint will be pulled evidently from future builds, but it'll be in the store. So people like me will be happy. The other issue, of course, was this is Windows. Like, there are like 9,000 Paint clone apps out there, including Paint.net, which has been around forever. A lot of people have always said it's better than Paint. And that too was announced as coming to the store. So again, problem solved. But this was, as if you wrote, if you read my editorial, I blame Microsoft, I blame the internet, and I blame all the fake Paint users out there who are just remembering from 20 years ago when they used to use this app. I actually use Paint every day, and I was not actually freaked out about this. But still, it was a stupid thing. I'm glad it's been resolved. But this, again, goes to show you how Microsoft sometimes still trips on its own feet, right? They could have just said, hey, we're done with Paint. We're going to put it in the store. And here's Paint 3D. And people would be like, okay. And literally nothing would have happened. Instead, they invited unneeded controversy.
So here's an interesting thing. You mentioned the Windows Fax and Scan and all that being put into the Windows Store. Windows Fax and Scan and WordPad are already in the Windows Store. They're just hidden, which is very interesting.
See?
Yeah, okay. They're already in there. They're not available, which is interesting.
Yeah, so you know what it is? Well, it could be API stuff. This gets back into the fact that like not all Win32 apps can be converted to Centennial through the bridge yet, right? So that's an ongoing process. So I'm sure some of the stuff needs to be lit up for them to be able to actually do that. And I would imagine Fax and Scan might be one of those because I would assume that requires some weird printer-like plugins and different things. So WordPad's another weird thing, right? I mean, so you have Notepad, WordPad, Word, like...
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious, like some people use, like they love Notepad. Mary Jo Foley famously loves Notepad. But why not WordPad? Like, to me, I would always like WordPad is just cooler than Notepad. It does more stuff. I don't know. And it's just weird that you have Notepad and WordPad. Like, why not just, why? So Microsoft has a lot of legacy stuff. And this gets to this other issue I bring up, which is it's a 30-year, Windows is built on 30 years of programming. You can't bring everything with you into the future. Like, you can't make a super lean OS that fits onto a watch and also still have, like, MS Paint in it, right? And I know MS Paint is not itself big, but when you times it by all the other crap that's been in Windows that's been coming along with all these builds, at some point, they just want to go, we got to get rid of this stuff. And the internet won't let them. That's what really bothers me. It's like every time they remove something, there's that one guy who's just like, no, I use it like 9 times a day. How dare you? Microsoft is just the worst. And it's just like, this is the problem of a successful product where you can't, it's tough to move on. And sometimes you got to make those cuts and you just have to tell your audience, you know, deal with it. Yeah, go on.
This is an ongoing problem with Windows. If you remember back in the Windows 8 days when Microsoft started creating the modern version of the control panel, there was outrage. Don't get rid of the control panel. The control panel's the best. We want everything in the control panel. Same thing happened with Windows 10 when they moved that into the modern version of Settings app. They're slowly deprecating the control panel, and there were power users going, "This is ridiculous. You're never going to be able to fully replace the control panel." And 2 years later, they still haven't fully replaced it, but they're slowly getting there. This doesn't happen overnight, and I feel like that might be the same story with Paint 3D. I know Paint 3D to many of us right now is a horrible replacement to the ancient Paint app that we love, but over time, maybe it will sort of improve.
Yeah, it's tough stuff. I mean, someone pointed out, like, you know, well, why haven't they updated MS Paint over the years? And I kind of see that, but at the same time, Microsoft's not an infinite size company. They don't have, like, the people, like, there was a good example of Pinball, MS Pinball, which was, it goes back to like Windows 7 and Windows 95 and everything where I never played solitaire. I literally do not know how to play solitaire, which is how I always tell people. Yeah, I have no idea what that is. That game never looked interesting to me. But Pinball, now that was a cool game. And so the question is like, why do we not have Pinball? Like, why didn't it come along to, I believe it was XP. It was dropped. The reason
I actually know the story to this. It was dropped.
Was it Vista?
With the Vista release, and the reason they dropped it is because when they were doing the porting from Windows XP 32 to 64, and Windows Vista was the first version of Windows to sort of be we're 64-bit. Yeah. The pinball code was, I think it was a third party that did it. It was licensed by Microsoft, and they didn't know, they had one single bug, and it's a pretty big bug in the game when it was ported to 64, and that was that the ball in the machine wouldn't interact with objects within the board, within the sort of machine, so it would just drop down, and you couldn't. Basically, the game was unplayable, and they looked at it for a few hours. They couldn't figure out why. So they basically just went, well, we can't spend this much time on this. So they just bought it.
Yeah, in the code, if for people who develop, they know this, but if you don't, when you write code, usually it's not just a wall of code. You actually do what's called commenting. And commenting are little notes that aren't compiled. They're not read by the program. They're notes for other developers so that when you read the code, you'd be like, oh, this is what this does. And they're literally little notes. And apparently the code for this clipping thing that was going on was not commented on. And so they spent time trying to find the code to fix it, couldn't do it. And the company that owned the code, like the people who worked on it weren't there anymore. So what I'm saying is like the people who made paint and like, they're not like just sitting there. Like I'm the paint guy and he just collects a paycheck and doesn't do it. Like they don't devote a lot of resources to this. And so they have to take someone off of a team like, hey, I know you're working on like say, OneNote, but we're going to take you off OneNote, which is our huge product that's actually doing very well and has a lot of momentum. We're going to put you on Paint. Like, you have to think, not only would that be like a weird thing to do, I'm sure that developer would be like, what the hell? I'm like working on the latest, greatest stuff for Windows, and now you're going to put me on like fixing Paint? Like, talk about a thankless task. So, I mean, these are just real world things that they have to deal with. It is funny, but at the same time, like I said, Microsoft could have, now they're saying, oh, we're just going to put it in the store. Like, why didn't they just say they're going to do that in the beginning? Like, were they always going to do that? Okay, why not say that? If they weren't going to do that, why weren't you going to do that? Like, it seemed to me like a no-brainer. Like, you have these bridges, just, put all these core little stupid apps into the store, literally create a sub-store called like Legacy. I don't know. And you can find, and they should even go back and put like really old ones in there. It'd be awesome, right? It'd be like Atari 2600 where people would run the ROMs, right? They just want that like old experience. I don't know.
See, that also falls in, and you mentioned this in your article, that falls into the sort of Xbox philosophy of everything should be preserved. And
sure.
Xbox right now are going on a whole thing like, we think games from the past should be preserved and playable on even today's hardware, which is why they're bringing Xbox original backwards compatibility to Xbox One. And I think Microsoft should do the same for Windows. Because, I mean, maybe not the oldest programs, but a lot of the older ones, especially from Windows XP, maybe even 95, should technically still work on Windows 10, maybe.
It would be pretty awesome to run Windows 3.11 apps. Shoot, at this point, you could probably port Windows 3.11 into the store as a whole and run it. Because people do that, right? You can actually run Windows within Windows. Like that is technically, I think, possible. That would be hilarious. Microsoft should do that. They should. I'm telling you right now, Microsoft, here's an idea. Plan it for next April Fool's joke.
And people would charge $10 for it.
Yeah, right. And I guarantee people would buy it. Maybe not for 10, but for $5. I mean, people would be like, oh, I can run Windows 3.1 within Windows 10. That would be sick. Like, it'd be hilarious. It'd be a great April Fool's joke. But if it worked, it would be amazing. Just like when they did the DOS on Windows Phone joke a few years ago. That was amazing. Like, they got a lot of good press for that. That was a really funny thing they did. So, all right.
Speaking of different app versions, Dan has a rant / thing to talk about regarding different app versions in the Windows Store.
Oh, this is like the Dan Rant podcast.
It is.
You're so angry.
Go for it.
I'm actually not angry about this. I just find it funny. So last night I reported that the Photos app on release preview got an update, and now it has intelligent search. And it's cool. They put a little search box up there, and what it does is it indexes your photos, both online and local, but saves it locally, so it's not like stored anywhere. And allows you to search by object. You can type in cat or turtle. You can type in color. You can type in months. You can go by faces. It'll show you all the faces, and it'll find all the photos. It's a really clever thing. If you're on Android, you probably know this. Google Photos does the same thing now. It also came out, I believe, this year. And it's both awesome and creepy, obviously. It's using AI, so the stuff is going through, analyzing photos, and feedback. And it's someone like me, I have over 6,000 evidently photos online from the years. I've never gone back and let me catalog those. Like, my life is not that boring where I have that time. I wish I did, but I don't. So I just have 6,000 photos sitting there. This allows me to actually go through and find those. And it was really cool. I was bringing up photos of my car when I first brought it home from the dealership, stuff like that. So it's really neat. But the issue is, now this was actually announced at Build, and there were some of this showed up for a little while in fast ring, and then it was pulled, and not many of us, I never saw it actually. But the issue here is on release preview. It's not on production. It's not even on fast ring, and it's not even on skip ahead as of, a couple hours ago. I didn't check, before the podcast. So if you really want this thing, you have to get on release preview. But if you're skip ahead, which in theory, you should be getting these new inbox experiences, you should be getting the latest and greatest. Instead, you get the cool OS stuff, but you're not getting the cool app stuff yet. And you're definitely not getting it on the fast ring. And it's just weird. I counted for the article, there were 4 different builds of Photos app out there, depending what ring you're on. And that's hilarious. And the same thing goes for Maps and Outlook and a couple of the other inbox apps too.
Not only that, but some of the builds have A/B testing going on where it will be the same build, but it will have 2 different sets of features, which is even more annoying and confusing. I mean, like some people are saying in the comments, they've had the search function for like a month at this point, which is like, yeah.
And some people now are saying that they're getting on skip ahead. So apparently it's been pushed through. They probably saw my article and like, oh yeah.
So the reason it's not on FastRing, and I know why it's not on FastRing, is because Microsoft needs to test the inbox apps that Windows ships with by default. Now, obviously all the time, teams within Microsoft are working on new versions of the inbox apps, but at some point, Microsoft has to find a stable version of that app and go, right, this is the one we're boxing with Windows 10. This is the one that comes out of box that's pre-installed within the image of Windows 10. And a lot of people in the world don't have great internet, so they have that image. And downloading app updates is a whole task. It's a whole thing that they got to set out a long period of time for. So Microsoft needs to test the inbox apps and make sure they work to the best they possibly can. And which is why on the inside of FastRing, when you're testing these Redstone 3 builds, Microsoft doesn't push any preview apps to you. They try to keep you using the inbox apps so they work. So Microsoft gets feedback and sees where the issues are and can fix them before release. I believe if you switch to slow ring, you do get some of the preview apps. The release preview ring I've noticed gets most preview apps, which is bizarre to say the least. It's like that's the ring for like the stable stuff, and Microsoft is pushing all the preview apps to that. What was skip ahead? As Dan just said, skip ahead should rectify this for FastRing users. So if you do want all the preview apps, you can use skip ahead and get all of the preview apps. But then comes the whole issue of, oh yeah, but there's like different apps for different A/B features, and some people get it at this point and others don't. Like the Story Remix app, for example, was basically that was built into the Photos app, but there was the same build rolled out, I think, but it was an A/B test. Only some insiders got the Story Remix, everybody else got just a bog standard Photos app, which was just a whole thing.
Yeah, I had Story Remix. If you remember when I got my house, I made an actual remix video of it. It worked pretty well, but and the A/B testing obviously throws loop too, because they never tell you as a consumer or person downloading it that you're part of A/B testing, which I almost think would be kind of useful. Like, hey, we're testing out this new feature. Give us feedback on it. Here's what to look for. And I find it hard as a journalist trying to cover it, because I'm like, I don't want to be out there and be like, hey, this new feature is available. Go get it now. And then my comments are filled with, I don't see it. I don't have it. What the hell? And people just get mad at you, and you're like, oh, well, I just assumed that it was, I got it. It's on everybody's PC. And this really gets into the thing. And this was Photos last night. I was hesitant to publish this article because I'm like, let me test my 9 computers laying around. Like, this takes a lot of time. I don't think people appreciate it. I have to, go to the store, check, okay, update, then I have to, compare and contrast. And it's just, compare build numbers and figure out what's going on. Then I had to ask you guys meaning the Windows Central staff, and they're up, hopefully, because a lot of times it's dropped at 10 o'clock at night and the UK guys are sleeping. And I'd be like, hey, are you guys seeing this? And it's just it gets really sort of, it's a nightmare to cover. But it also happened this week with the Windows Store app. So
yeah, I was going to mention that one.
Yeah, Windows Store got updated as well for some users, release preview as well, and probably now the skip ahead. They changed the UI around a bit, so now instead of a jet black background, it is gray, like a dark gray. And it allows for more contrast. Everything doesn't blend in as much, specifically with when you're looking at an app page and you're looking at all the requirements and everything. Right now, it just looks like black background and floating white text. With the gray background, you can actually get you can see where the boxes kind of are. It gives a little bit of, without creating borders, a border-like effect. So I like it, and surprisingly, a lot of people apparently like it, going by the comments and feedback. They also separated the, if you remember in the Store app, you have your little circle icon for your Microsoft accounts. That was always a little confusing because you had to click that to go to all the settings, and that was strange because that's usually just account info. And what they did now is they created a separate ellipsis menu, which has all the settings and all the other account things like downloads. And they separated those out. I think that was a smart move as well. There's also looks like some subtle animation changes. And the other small thing was they changed check for updates to get updates.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, when you look at it through the sub menu, so now if you go to the ellipsis, you bring it down, it goes downloads and updates, and you click that, and then you have a button that says get updates.
Yeah, but get updates assumes there's an update available, and there's not always an update. So it doesn't. Check for updates made a lot more sense in general.
Yeah,
it was
ambiguous. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, but
also the ellipsis menus are sort of throwback to Windows Phone 7 design, where the ellipsis menus were everywhere back then. That was the whole thing. And this is the first ellipsis menu I think I've seen in a Windows 10 app.
Oh, really? No,
I think so.
Edge has it. I'm looking at Edge right now.
Oh yeah, Edge just has it. Yeah.
Doesn't Skype have?
Yeah, Edge doesn't count though. Edge doesn't count.
Skype maybe. Yeah, now we're going to do a live check of all the apps. Let's see. News.
Well, I mean, that is
news
sort of
is a hamburger.
Callback. Yeah, I was going to say like a hamburger menu would have made sense for the store, but oh well. I guess
Although,
they're trying to move away from hamburgers.
MSN News does have an ellipsis too. But,
well, maybe I just don't pay attention. But yeah.
I
just thought that was a very nice throwback to Windows Phone 7 design.
It's funny because an ellipsis menu and a hamburger menu are kind of the same thing.
They are the same thing, except that basically ellipsis menus are like acceptable on the right side of an app, whereas hamburger menus are only left side.
I feel like if they just changed it all to ellipsis, people are like, oh, they finally get it. We don't like hamburger menus. They were stupid, but yeah, give me the ellipsis. Although the ellipsis thing does make a little bit more sense with the phone because the issue was hamburgers were the upper left corner, where ellipses tend to be the lower corners and were more thumb friendly. So, but yeah. So the good news here is if you're unimpressed with the Fall Creators Update, there are cool things that are coming. And this is what I find frustrating. I find some of the stuff that comes through the inbox apps more exciting than the stuff that comes through the OS. And that's because I'm a hardcore user of the native apps, the inbox apps, MSN News, Skype, the Windows Store, of course, and everything else we've been talking about. Groove, especially. Oh yeah, let's talk about Groove. Groove this week, luckily, I think everybody got this. Got a dedicated video section for your artist. So previously they introduced, and this was a really neat feature that people have asked for a long time because it was part of Zune, where you can watch videos of your favorite artist. So I'm a huge Rise Against fan, and how this worked for a while was if you were just playing Rise Against stuff on your phone or your PC, you can enable a video mode, and basically if it detected a video, the video would start to play. It was kind of cool. But if you just want to watch videos, there's really no way to do that. So now what happens is when I go to Rise Against, the artist page, I can scroll down, I can look at the latest albums, their biggest hits, recommendations, but now there's also a video section, and it gives me the top videos, and I can click and expand that. It shows me all the videos collected. Some of them are official videos, some of them are like come through like surprisingly like AOL. Like I saw videos I hadn't seen before because they were only on like AOL or some other network that probably doesn't even exist anymore. But now you can just watch the videos of your favorite artist directly. Huge fan of this. I'm such a hardcore user of Groove. I find it such a good app. I'm glad to see it continuing to sort of get these features that make up for what Zune was. Again, going back to the paint thing, the Zune crowd is another crowd that is just like, no matter how good Groove gets, it's like, yeah, you know what though? It ain't Zune. Like, Zune did it first, and it's just like, oh my God, just let it go already. Yeah. It's funny though, if you go into your Windows subfolder and you search for Zune, you'll still find references to Zune. So it still exists.
The Groove app is still called Zune in the files, which is funny. Real quick, I do want to mention that the the app updates for a release of Windows is very much part of that release. Like I know people just like I used to be in this mindset as well. A Windows release was all about the stuff that came in the OS. The apps were not part of that. But with Windows 10 and it being a service, it kind of is. Like a lot of the app updates we're getting now are part of the full Creators Update vision. And although they are coming to the current production builds, that's fine. This is kind of what they're pushing now for the next release. And things like the store update, these improvements to Groove, the My People update and the People app update, I'm pretty sure Mail and Calendar are going to get updates. You're going to see a lot of these updates, a lot of these apps get more updates as we progress towards the launch of the full Creators Update. I mean, a lot of Fluent Design. I mean, but Microsoft did make a big deal about Fluent Design this year, which was interesting because the full Creators Update itself doesn't really have much of it yet.
Right.
But it will be showing up in apps, and Microsoft did show off at Build a number of working code in apps such as Mail and Calendar, the Store app, and several other Edge, which all don't have Fluent Design yet. I don't think Edge will be getting Fluent Design with this release, but I'm pretty sure Mail and Calendar and a bunch of others will be getting it before the year's end. So we'll be seeing that.
And hopefully on Xbox too. For those watching us
on
on Xbox today, hopefully your Xbox UI, we're hearing rumors. We've said it before that there's going to be another UI shift coming for Xbox. And that'll be interesting. Presumably we'll start to see the Fluent Design stuff. I'm still not 100% satisfied with the Xbox UI. I do like the latest improvements with the pop-out menus. I do find it more convenient, but it needs to be faster. Skype needs to work better too. You and I.
Oh my God! Don't talk about Skype. I hate the UWP app.
Yeah, well, I like the UWP app. I don't like the experience on Xbox. And now this gets into the hard problem with UWP, which is these apps how they run on Xbox. Now the UWP app does change its UI a bit for Xbox because you need to. You're using a controller. You're not using a mouse and keyboard, or your touchscreen. But yeah, but that doesn't make up for the fact that it takes 5 minutes for the app to seemingly load and another 2 minutes to make a call, and it's very slow to respond. And this gets into the fact that Xbox is essentially a cheap PC that runs a hard disk drive. And so there are limits they, are hitting here. But I don't know. Xbox Scorpio, or I should say Xbox One X. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there, but expect some changes going on. I'm still part of the Alpha Ring. But I don't follow that. That's Jez's beat. If you want to follow what's going on, follow Jez and Matt. They're our Xbox gurus. They can tell you all the nitty gritty.
It is worth noting that the current Xbox Insider program are still flighting Redstone 2 builds and changes. So even though the Xbox is still getting new features, Xbox development is slightly different. All of the new features are still coming in that Redstone 2 RTM build, which is 15063. They haven't yet started flighting Redstone 3 builds for Xbox Insiders yet. When they do that, I assume that's when the new design and all the bigger features will be announced. You'll notice at E3, Microsoft didn't talk about the OS at all at E3. Nope. Microsoft were very focused on the games at E3 this year. They did say at E3 that they will have...
One X. Yeah, they didn't even show the UI.
They did say at the event that they will have more to announce regarding the software and the dashboard and the OS at a later date. So I would expect soon we'll get an announcement on that.
My guess is with the Xbox One X, there, as far as I know, are no images of it with the dashboard running. And my guess is because they do have a UI change that's coming with it, and they weren't ready to announce it, but they also didn't want to go, here's what's going to look like, and then it juxtaposes with what actually comes out. It's like, wait, why does it look different?
Which is what the Windows team do all the time, by the way. The My People stuff's a perfect example. When they announced My People, that here's this awesome UI, like it's all 3D and magical, and things like pop out of the window frame. The current My People looks nothing like that.
Yeah. If you go back to this is a good point. Back to November with the Surface Studio announcement, they showed My People. And if you look at the icon, the circular icons, they actually extended beyond the border. This was supposed to be a part of Fluent Design where elements could break out of the border and give a more 3D effect. And I actually really liked it. I thought it was a cool thing. Instead of everything being so boxy, this gave it a little bit more life. Now, we don't know the status of that, presumably, because Fluent Design, as we said, is a 1.0 thing. In other words, what we see now is just a stage of Fluent Design. But it's going to be, for instance, acrylic is a material that they can use for the opaqueness and all that. But it's called acrylic, and the subcategory is materials because, or the main category, because there are going to be other types of materials coming through. And so, in other words, it's going to be a lot more to Fluent Design coming with next year, 2018, and everything like that. So this is an ongoing thing. And hopefully we'll see this thing that breaks past borders. In fact, hopefully we'll also see the thing that drives people nuts, removal of that 1 pixel border around UWP apps, which...
Oh, please. When is that going to... I can't believe it's still there. I guess it's there for accessibility reasons. Like, it might be difficult to determine which app's in view right now. But I think once acrylic and Fluent Design are fully implemented, it'll be a lot easier, which is when they can remove the gross 1 pixel border that we all despise.
Yeah. I'm amazed at how many people actually hate that.
It's just ridiculous. It stands out too much for me. Right. Moving on to our next story is another Dan story. This is Dan's podcast this week. Dan's GPD review. So if you actually, I'll intro it for you. If you don't know what the GPD is, it's essentially a really tiny Windows 10 PC tablet thing. Except it's not. It's more like a laptop because it's got a keyboard that's attached to it. Look at it. It's basically the Surface phone.
People were like, does it make calls? I'm like, yes, through Skype. Yeah, right. Oh, this is the coolest device. Now, I can't recommend people go buy it. If you have the money and you're just like, I have $500, it's cool if you can afford it. Because it works well. It's a lot of fun. It's one of these devices where you can think of clever ways to use it. Having said that, if you're like, I need a laptop, should I go get this and spend my $500 on it? No. It's tough to type on, but it is one of the things, it's so well made. I'm really blown away by the quality. It's just absolutely solid. It's really nice looking. You see, they didn't put any stupid logos on it. It's just this like really clean thing. It's solid metal. They just did such a good job, but the quality of hardware they put in it is also really good. It's got 8 gigs of RAM, which is hilarious. Basically, you can buy a Surface Pro or Surface laptop with 4 gigs of RAM, right? So this thing already out the box has some better specs. Now, it only runs an Intel Atom processor, and I'm not a fan of those. However, they don't really have any options at this point. This is all they had. So I did make the point, I think this device will be a little bit more interesting once Windows 10 on ARM comes out, and they can use, that kind of processor in this device. I think it'll be a little bit more interesting for battery life, for performance, for heat, because it does have a small fan in it, which is hilarious. It's got a little vents and everything, and you can hear the fan whir on if you're playing a good game. But what makes it killer is the display. It's like 1900 by 1200, which, if you're on a laptop, not a big deal. If you're on a 7-inch display, though, for a computer, it's 323 pixels per inch, which is higher than a Retina level. It looks really good, and it's a touchscreen, which is so bizarre because it's just like, it looks like it should be a touchscreen, but it looks like one of those things like, oh, but it's not. No, total touchscreen, and it works well. The only thing is, the keyboard, not the best, and it's not their fault. They're trying to put a full desktop keyboard into a device that's 7 inches. It's pretty tough to make that experience good. Now, the key travel, ironically, is very nice. The keys themselves are good. It's just a fun device, and the audio is pretty decent. I really like it I am a huge, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Sling TV user. It's great for watching Sling. Like, I could just throw live TV on this thing and watch it. I could imagine being on an airplane, which, when you travel on airplanes, if you fly coach these days, it is so cramped. And for a lot of people, if you have like a 14-inch laptop, busting that thing out mid-flight to watch a movie it's not the best experience. Like, you're going to be elbowing people to do it. This thing, though, even one of my best friends, he saw, he's like, I would love to use it on an airplane. Like, so there are clever little uses for it. But what's really cool is it has, mini HDMI out or micro HDMI out. It has a USB Type-C, which can handle display, data, and charging, and a USB Type-A. So again, this has better ports than the Surface does. But you can run a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse to this, or plug in a mouse and an external monitor. And now this thing is like a full desktop PC. Now, again, niche, right? I mean, not many people are going to go and have that set up. It's sort of like Continuum for Windows Phone. But it totally works. And for some people, I can see them using this as like this little device. And it totally fits in a pocket. Now, it's large. It's like the Elite X3. But you could actually put this in a jacket pocket or something like that, carry it around with you. Just really impressive. Not perfect, like I said, a little expensive, but it's well made. They did a great job with it. I really haven't had any issues. The display is almost better than it should be. It's just one of those devices where you normally would buy it. So it was also crowdfunded. Although GPD does make some stuff. And you can go buy it on Amazon right now, although you want to pay the import fee for it. It's going to be expensive. But, for being a crowdfunded thing, you usually expect, like, okay, the display is going to be, not good. This is an IPS display, though. It's actually, like, a really nice display. And everything about it is just, it's cool to see a company go, like, yeah, we're going to make this thing and put quality parts in it. For instance, it has a Samsung eMMC storage in there, so it's not SSD. It would be too big, right? Ironically. But they did use Samsung components. It has a Broadcom modem in there for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Now, not everybody loves Broadcom, but it's a brand name at least, you know. So they used like really quality components on the inside. I don't know, neat thing to watch. If you have the money and you just want a fun hobbyist device, you can do a lot with it. Don't go buy it if you need a laptop, you know, as your main device though.
What's the device called again?
GPD Pocket.
Didn't GPD? It's the company, I guess, is called GPD. I assume.
Yes.
Didn't they make a gamepad sort of Windows 10 device previously as well? They had because your one has a full keyboard, like a normal. Well, I say full. It's a miniature keyboard.
Yep.
But they made one before, which of a similar size, I believe. It's slightly not as premium, I don't think. But it had, instead of a keyboard, it had a gamepad.
Yes,
Jez reviewed it, yeah. So we have a review on Windows Central. Yeah, but it had a gamepad instead, and that was a cool idea. So what you could do is you could hook up to Xbox Stream, whatever it's called, and you could play your Xbox One games on your Windows 10 mini gamepad, which was a cool idea.
Or put a ROM emulator on it, because it's running full Windows 10 on there, so you can put all your emulators. Now, it's a nightmare to set up. Obviously, without a keyboard, you need to plug in stuff to type in your password to Steam or whatever, but... yeah, once you got it. Yeah, so they made another version of this, as Zach pointed out, I think it's called GPD Game or something. I linked to it, Jez's review, but it has gamepad controllers, so it's more of a gaming-oriented. This one's more Pocket PC-oriented, but you can connect. What I do is I just connect my Xbox wireless Bluetooth controller up to it. I play pinball on there, and it's awesome. Like, I don't know, it's a cool thing. Like, I'm really fortunate. I got it. They didn't send it to me. I actually bought this through... I was a campaign supporter, so I only got it for $3.99, which was the early adopter price, which was pretty cool. I don't know, neat stuff, cool company to follow. They willing to take risks, which I like, but they do it and they did it in style. So I think it'll be a little more interesting with Windows 10 on ARM, but hopefully we'll start to see devices like this coming forward. But yeah, I don't know. Go read the review, give it a shot. If you have some extra money, go get it. Don't get it if you're spending your rent money. It's not worth it for that, but yeah.
It would be awesome if this device had an Intel quad-core CPU, though.
Oh, yeah, let's quickly talk. Wow, this podcast is running a little bit longer.
I know, it is.
This is all Dan ranting. I apologize. Yeah, so this is kind of a big deal. One of the big things when I review Surface devices especially, but other Ultrabooks, people always ask, does it game? In fact, I wrote an article this week about Surface Pro and Surface Laptop, whether or not they're good for gaming. Short answer, no. But one of the reasons is because they don't have quad-core processors or discrete GPUs in them. Putting a quad-core processor into an Ultrabook is very difficult. Their quad-cores currently are only 45-watt chips, so they take a lot of power. That's why the Dell XPS 15 has a 99-watt-hour battery, which is huge. Versus like the 43 watt hour found in the Surface. So they drain a lot more power. They get way hotter, so you need bigger fans, bigger heat pipes. It's really hard. Now, you can do this. Lenovo, I believe, has, I think it's the Mix 720, is like a tablet device, has a quad core in it. So you kind of can do this, but it's still a 45 watt chip. So what makes an Ultrabook? Someone asked me, like, well, how thin does a device need to be an Ultrabook? It's actually not that. What makes an Ultrabook is it uses a 15 watt ultra low wattage processor, what's called a ULV. And those are what you find in Surface, you find in the HP EliteBook, the Spectre, the Dell XPS 13. All those are dual core low wattage chips. So the question is, like, will we ever get like a quad-core Surface Pro? Now, I don't expect one this year. But Intel is coming out with, evidently, their Coffee Lake processor, which is not the generational shift that people want, which is Cannon Lake. So Cannon Lake will jump from the 14 nanometer process to the 10 nanometer. That's a really big jump. That means you're going to get really small chips, less heat, but they're also harder to mass produce. And so we're still waiting on that. But in the meantime, we'll get Coffee Lake. And Coffee Lake evidently will introduce these low wattage, 15 watt quad core processors. For running single core tasks, so just running single apps, stuff like that, you're not going to notice a difference. In fact, they'll perform very similar to today's devices. What'll matter is when you do video editing, or photo editing, running video games, anything that's going to be a heavy task for a laptop, you'll be able to get this extra boost with a quad core. And it's pretty exciting. What that means and what I expect is that this fall, you'll see it announced at IFA in Berlin. September, we'll be there. But you'll start to see companies probably coming out also to CES in January, announcing revisions to their devices. In other words, you'll see like a Dell XPS 13 But now they'll have a quad-core chip in there, but still going to get the same battery life, but it'll give you that extra power. Now, these are still not gaming machines. Keep in mind, to make a gaming machine, you need a discrete GPU, something from NVIDIA, something from AMD, that has its own dedicated video RAM, also higher clock rates, and it's basically its own thing. Intel still does their Intel HD graphics. They're nice. They're not gaming graphics, though. So this is going to be like a device that's close to the XPS 15 in performance for productivity, but you're still not going to be able to really game on them. But it's going to be really good for people who want to do processing and, Excel and database compiling and all this kind of stuff. It's a big change, though, and I'm very excited to see this gets to the Surface Book 2. I don't know. We don't know what's in Surface Book 2. We don't know when it's coming out. Presumably, maybe the fall, maybe not. Who knows? I would love to, but the Surface Book is positioned as their powerhouse PC. It's the only one with a performance base that can actually game, that they show it as gaming. And I would hope with the Surface Book to keep that, Surface Book 2 at least, to keep that, marketing going. Here it is. This is the most powerful Surface you can take with you. I would hope that they go with this quad-core chip, but we'll have to kind of see. This is also kind of what you want, right, Zach?
Yeah, I would like Microsoft to sort of differentiate the Surface Book and the Surface Laptop, for example, because the Surface Book and the Surface Laptop are kind of similar right now, apart from the book being able to detach and has a more powerful graphics chip in it. But then imagine if it had a quad core. Microsoft could definitively say this is the book, this is the device for professionals and power users, and then we got the laptop for the more casual user, then the Surface Pro for the people in between. So yeah, I would definitely like to see a quad core in the Surface Book. And then again, at the same time, would you need a quad core in a device that's technically a 2-in-1? That's because the Surface Book falls in a very odd category of it. It's a device aimed at professionals, but it's also a tablet, technically.
Sure.
It's a very it's unlike the MacBook Pro or the iPad, where they're two distinct products. The MacBook Pro is the MacBook Pro. The iPad is obviously the iPad. Microsoft has looked at the MacBook Pro and went, let's make that also an iPad, and that's what the Surface Book technically is. So
although that's where it gets weird, right? So Mac, or Apple I should say, in their MacBook Pros, at least some of them use 25-watt chips, which are weird because we don't see those a lot with Windows 10 devices. We see 15 or 45. So they get kind of in between with this 25-watt chips, which are definitely more powerful than 15. And then I think the 15-inch MacBook Pros do go to the quad-core chips, and they can be pretty powerful. And that's how they position Surface Book, right? Against a MacBook Pro, Surface Laptop is against MacBook, and maybe Surface Pro is kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's MacBook Air, but I don't know. I think they should definitely have a quad, because quad-core processing, you're not going to use the cores and the multi-threading all the time, but when you need it for those tasks, it'll be there. And you're not going to necessarily make it a gaming laptop, although they would presumably also, for a performance-based version, put in a, now NVIDIA has that, now I forgot the name of it, that new form factor they can do for the video cards, which is a lot thinner and smaller. They could presumably maybe put in a 1050 in there, or even a 1060. I don't know. This is one of those things we'll have to kind of wait and see. So the good news is, for if you're into computers, you're into PCs, we're hitting this really cool era of we're getting to some really intense computing power. And we're going to still have these really thin devices, but to have a really thin tablet device that's quad-core and still get good battery life, right? That's the other catch here. It's going to be really impressive. Because right now, a company could be like, oh, we're going to jam a 45-watt chip into a 2.1-pound tablet. And there you go. Yeah, and you'll probably get 4 hours of battery life. And some people, that's worth it, but for consumers, probably not. This will bridge that gap, and I'm pretty excited about it. So pay attention to September IFA. And hopefully maybe we'll hear something from Microsoft too at some point in October, November.
That'd be nice. Moving on to our very last story, Cortana Skills. Now, this isn't exactly a new thing. Cortana Skills were announced at Build this year back in May, and they actually went out in preview on the same day they were announced. So May 10th or 11th is when they went out in preview. And for those who don't know, we haven't talked about it on the podcast before, I don't believe. For those who don't know, Cortana Skills are essentially things that make Cortana more intelligent and more useful to you. Similar to the Amazon Echo, this is Microsoft pushing into that smart home sort of speaker market that they're still absent in, weirdly. So Cortana's getting more skills, and what these essentially do is you can say things like, "Hey Cortana, I know I activated all yours, I'm sorry." You can say, "Hey Cortana, remind me to, do something with a certain kind of service or device." So things like Fitbit, Food Network, Skyscanner, iHeartRadio, all of those services, Domino's, they can all build skills for Cortana, and then you can ask Cortana to do specific commands within those services. So I can say, "Hey Cortana, order me a Domino's pizza," and Cortana say, "Hey, I can do that." Then she orders the pizza. And I think this week's this was in the news again this week because Fitbit's now got support for Cortana Skills, right, Dan?
Yes. So Fitbit got this, and now you can be like, I don't want to say the word because all my devices will go off.
I don't care. I just said it.
But yeah, you can be like, hey, ask it. It gets weird. Hey, Fitbit, what's my activity report? Or ask Fitbit. So you have to ask Cortana. You got to get Cortana's attention, and then be like, hey, you go ask Fitbit what my status is for today. Yeah. And this gets to the issue of natural language processing, and like there's a little flexibility in what you can say, but you kind of really have to memorize the command for it. I still find this kind of an issue. I don't know. These things are kind of neat, but they also feel like things I won't use regularly. I was stoked to see Domino's on there because I'm a huge Domino's fan. Again, Domino's, if you want to sponsor this podcast, hit me. Big fan of your food. So I was kind of excited to see that. I'd rather see a Windows 10 app or an Xbox app, though. But and you can be like, hey, order my Domino's has a thing where if you order stuff regularly, it saves as like an order. You can tell it to do that. I don't know, though. I still don't find it as natural. I still have to kind of pause for a second and be like, oh, okay, this is what I want to say. We're getting there. Well, the good news is the more people use this stuff, the more data they can collect and analyze, and they can improve it. But I don't know. Some of the stuff is really weird and niche, like, hey, Skyscanner, check if flight 108 is like am I really going to do that?
If I'm honest, this whole market's a very niche market now. I mean, a lot of these skills only make sense if you have a dedicated Cortana speaker, and right now they aren't on the market. Microsoft hasn't got one on sale. I know there is one coming, but that's not coming out till later this year after the full Creators Update launches. And although it works in Cortana right now through Cortana on desktop and on Android and iPhone, that's not really where you want these kind of things. You want them to be accessible from anywhere. Like, for example, the Amazon Echo. The reason that's so popular is because you can just shout into the air and it picks you up, because obviously it's a speaker that's always listening. So I can be like, hey, Alexa, what's my flash briefing? That's a popular one that the Alexa does. And what that essentially does is you can set up certain apps that will sort of give you a brief overview of what's going on within that service. So you can have BBC News, a bunch of other things, and you can say, what's my flash briefing? And Alexa will be like, okay, so here's what's happening today. The weather's this, the breaking news is this, and here's what your calendar alerts and all that good stuff. I don't think Cortana has something like that yet, so maybe she does. But of course, that's not really useful to anybody because there's no dedicated device for that. Nobody's talking to their computers still. And I know Microsoft disagrees. Nobody talks to their computer. Nobody does it. Right. No one does it casually like they do with an Amazon Echo.
Although, we should mention, this week's Insider Build, did bring the ability to restart your computer, shut it down, log out through Cortana.
Because they announced this a long time ago, and then they apparently turned it off, and now they've turned it back on. So. Yeah, and there's some third-party apps that did this. It's a weird thing that people have asked for. Again, I'm not really ever going to use it, I don't think. But the voice stuff is definitely strange, especially the dedicated. I agree with dedicated device. Even there, I think it's a little bit weird. I wouldn't know, though. Wink. Sorry. And they will have a thing where you can be like, read my, the latest headlines kind of thing for their device. But this stuff is, it definitely is niche. I can tell you from using devices that you talk to, like Alexa, that you use them for like two things. What's the weather? Remind me, three things maybe. What's the weather? Remind me to do something in like 5 minutes, which is also sometimes hilarious because I'll tell it to remind me to. You can put profane things in there and just make fun of people who are in your house at the time, or to play music. And they're good for that. I actually do like them for playing music, and that's kind of what they're there for. I mean, but
some of this more niche stuff, like I don't know if I'll probably ask Cortana ever to give me my Fitbit like status of the day when I can just look at my watch that I'm wearing, right?
Yeah.
And get it and actually see it. Yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of interesting stuff, but
I am very interested in this whole voice-based smart home, smart speaker thing market. I have an Alexa, which I dislike because it's Amazon and not Microsoft. But once the Harman Kardon comes out and Cortana enters herself onto more speaker-based devices, I feel like I will definitely be investing in that market because, I don't know. I know it's very niche, and as you say, there's not many services right now. But I feel like there's potential for it. Because I mean, in the movies it works. Like, you know, people in like smart homes of the future, they walk into rooms and they just say, "Hey, computer," and the just talks to you back. I feel like that's where we're heading with these sort of speaker-based assistants. But
sure,
we're at the very early stages of that.
Yeah, and that's where the natural language stuff. Greg Edwards mentions in comments is a good point that with Fitbit you could also tell it to log certain things, so which is probably definitely more useful. So yeah, if you I always find it weird if people log their water intake. Like
one of the Cortana skills I hope become a thing is being able to text people from just the speaker. Say, hey Cortana, text. Blah. I think that already happens through desktop, but I don't know if the Cortana speakers will be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't believe so far it can.
I know you can do
Skype
calls, which is, I mean, okay to some extent, I guess. But being able to place cellular calls or SMS text messages would be amazing. Yep,
yeah. All good stuff, exciting times. We're way over our podcast limit. We apologize for that. You just have to drone on with my rants. But I think that'll wrap us up for this week. We'll stick around for a little bit for questions and comments, as usual, for live podcast. If you are listening to this recorded afterwards, remember you can tune in Fridays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on our mixer.com/Windows Central channel. Watch us live, join the comments, and listen to us as well as ask us questions. Otherwise, you can also join us on Thursdays where we do Microsoft Gaming Libations with me, Zach, and Jez, where we get to play games, give away codes, chat with you guys, and you get to see us play the latest and greatest games. This week we did Fortnite, which was a lot of fun, although half of it was Zach and I training separately. Maybe the next time we'll do it again. But always good stuff. So join in for that. Check out our mixer.com channel as well. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Daniel_Rubino, R-U-B as in boy, I-N-O. And you can follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN, all one word. And you can hit us up on Twitter, ask us some questions, and it'll be all good. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye.